デンジ君はさ、田舎のネズミと都会のネズミ、どっちがいい？
The Chainsaw Man movie is coming out this fall, and as bad as I feel for those MAPPA animators, I need them to work a little faster because we'll be one step closer to animating the manga moments that absolutely took my breath away. Now don't get me wrong, the Reise arc is great in its own right, but there are several moments towards the end of Part 1's story that I dearly wish to see animated. And I'm going to talk about spoilers from here on out, so don't say I didn't warn you. What I can't wait to see animated are the moments that lead to the deaths of both Aki and Power. These 2 points in the story completely blindsided me on my first read, and I couldn't believe that their character arcs just ended. I kept flipping the manga pages back and forth to see if my eyes were deceiving me, but no. There weren't any Power or Friendship revival sequences to be found anywhere. I kept coping with each chapter that maybe there was a chance, a hope. And then Part 2 started, which cured my terminal cope. Right, so why do I want to see these moments animated so badly? Am I some sadist or something who thrives on the suffering of others? Well, no. But in this case, yeah. Not only are these two deaths absolutely miserable, they're done in a way that puts a hideous smile on my face. Let's begin with Aki's death, because it happens first. So to give some context, within our main trio of Aki, Power, and Denji, Aki is kind of like the Sasuke of the group. They both lust for revenge against someone that killed their family, and this vengeance is what keeps them going. They're also both pretty edgy. Going with this Naruto analogy, Denji would be the Naruto of the group, except he's much less Databayo and more degenerate. And when it comes to Power, I mean, she doesn't really fit the Sakura archetype, but I guess they both use force when they're annoyed. Anyway, throughout the majority of Chainsaw Man Part 1, Aki's one guiding principle is that he's willing to go through anything, whether it's shaving off physical parts of his body or his literal lifespan, to eradicate the gun devil that killed his family. With this, his initial interactions with Denji and Power are pretty dismissive and cold. However, we see his character begin to warm up to a point where he's able to drop his lifelong mission of revenge for the safety of his friends. After literally experiencing hell together, the trio have a period of slice of life that's really wholesome, and it's satisfying seeing the main cast goof around with disregard for what's happening around them. Unfortunately, true happiness is a myth in the Fujimoto-verse, and so of course, everything quickly goes to shit. The trio goes to speak with Makima, who rejects Aki's request for his partners to be exempt from the gun devil hunt. But turns out this was just a trick, because Makima then quickly explains how the gun devil is already captured, and the three will need to prepare for a war that looms over the horizon. After this, Aki has a future premonition, and he asks the future devil for clarification. It confirms that Denji kills both Power and he in the near future. Aki and the angel devil later meet up with Makima at a beach, and here, she turns Aki into a puppet. The angel devil resists at first, but he too is enslaved. A very short battle ensues between Makima and the gun devil, and then suddenly, we're back with Denji and Power. Denji hears the doorbell ring, and thinking that it might be Aki, he goes to get the door, until Puchita says, "Don't open the door." Denji hesitates, but the doorbell continues to ring. The phone also begins to ring, and this wakes up Power, who's clearly annoyed. Denji picks up the phone, and it's Makima on the other end. She explains what happened with the gun devil, and casually says that the one ringing the doorbell is the new gun fiend. Denji is in disbelief at what's happening, and to this, Makima just says to not think and fight what's outside. The phone call ends, and Power is annoyed by Denji's stalling. She's adamant that the one ringing the doorbell has to be Aki. She calls out asking if he's there, and she's met with silence. This causes Denji to further believe what Makima had said, and so he tells Power to grab her cat and run to the balcony. As she's running, Denji mutters to himself that there's no way that the gun fiend is behind the door. He opens the door, and lo and behold, it's the gun fiend. The gun fiend calls out Denji's name, and Denji, not recognizing who's in front of him, confusingly asks how it knows who he is. We now begin the infamous Snowball fight. We see Aki, who appears much younger in this POV, and he mutters to himself that it's cold outside, He sees Denji in the distance and feels that there's a snowball in his hand. Putting two and two together, young Aki realizes that it's a snowball fight, and he preps his artillery. Snapping back to reality, the gun fiend sends Denji flying, absolutely destroying their home. He hollers at Power to hide from the gun fiend. This confuses Power though, because the scent of the person at the door smelled like Aki. Denji now fully realizes that the thing that's attacking him and Power is actually Aki. Aki, completely unaware of what's going on, jumps Power, but she's protected by Denji at the last second. Now, we continue the snowball fight. Young Aki notices Power and asks her to join Denji's team. Young Aki preps a snowball and begins to launch it. We're back in reality now, and the snowball is actually a giant blast that sends Denji and Power flying. Aki, trapped in his snowball fight POV, glances over at some pedestrians and asks if they want to play as well. He aims his gun arm and prepares to blast the pedestrians away. All the while, Denji is exploding at Aki, demanding for him to stop. Denji's cries end in vain as Aki goes ahead and fires a shot, evaporating the pedestrians. Denji is furious now, and he sends one of his chainsaw arms flying at Aki. We're back in snowball fight POV, and young Aki recoils from a snowball thrown by Denji. Young Aki says,
"Take this,"
and hurls a snowball at Denji. Now back in reality again, we see that the snowball was actually another massive blast that eviscerates multiple houses, decimating the innocent civilians inside. Aki turns his attention to another pedestrian, and as he shoots, Denji jumps in and blocks the attack. The force of the attack sends Denji flying backwards, and he crashes into a building. As he's recovering, all he can see around him is death and destruction. Denji yells at Aki repeatedly to stop, but all Aki can do is smile, blissfully unaware of the havoc he's spreading. Denji continues to converse with Aki, pleading for him to wake up, desperately reminding him that this is the antithesis of Aki's whole identity. But I remind you, this is the Fujimotoverse, and the power of friendship is as useful as a fart in the wind. We shift back to Snowball Fight POV, where young Aki remarks he hasn't had this much fun before. He takes a moment to fully absorb the enjoyment of his recent life, and then hurls a snowball at Denji. We then see both an IRL POV and a Snowball Fight POV of Denji lying lifelessly on the ground. Now we begin switching back and forth from Snowball Fight POV to IRL, and Aki, fully immersed in his snowball fight, taunts Denji. Denji gets up, and young Aki hurls another snowball at Denji. The blast IRL takes a chunk out of Denji's torso, but unfazed, he clashes with Aki, screaming and begging for him to go back to normal. Young Aki remarks that his hands are cold, and then IRL Aki shoots Denji with a blast from the gun lodged into his forehead. Denji is sent flying yet again by another blast, and everything in the vicinity is destroyed. We can see now that Denji is in critical condition. But luckily, he served some blood by pedestrians around him who don't want to vaporize like the others. Now back to normal, Denji looks up and finds himself in one of the coldest panels in the manga. We're again in Snowball Fight POV, and young Aki is hit with a barrage of snowballs from Denji. Young Aki prepares to retaliate, but notices Denji crying for the first time. Young Aki falls back, surrendering, and sorely remarks that he doesn't even like snowball fights to begin with. Young Aki looks around and can't seem to find Denji anywhere. As he stands in disbelief, the silence is suddenly broken by his younger brother calling out to him. Young Aki acknowledges his brother and notes to himself that he wanted to play catch. Back in reality, we see the brutal conclusion between Denji and what is left of Aki. Denji drops to his knees and stares blankly at the sky, not knowing how to process what had just happened. In the background, the future devil mutters to himself that Aki did ultimately die horribly. For Denji, that is. The last we ever see of Aki is his lifeless gun-fused head, and a final snowball POV of young Aki playing catch with his brother. Let's take a quick pause now. I knew what was going to happen while rereading the manga for this video, but it still hits so hard, man. And to make it even worse, it's not even over. We still have one more death to go through. Okay, pause done. So some time has now passed after Denji put Aki to rest, but he's still traumatized from all the events that occurred. Denji's mind is completely cooked, and he doesn't know what to feel or think. Out of the shadows, Makima randomly shows up and takes Denji to her place to warm him up. At the house, the two are bombarded by a pack of dogs who eagerly lick both of their faces. She offers some tea and tiramisu to Denji and then begins playing with her dogs. Denji, able to have a moment of tranquility from all the horror that had happened recently, thinks to himself that this is pretty great. Makima, while coddling Denji, asks if he remembers the promise they had made for when he kills the gun devil. He glances at one of the dogs he's playing with, and then he asks to become one of Makima's dogs. Makima asks for clarification, and Denji reveals his abysmal state of affairs. She follows up with another question to reinforce whether Denji is sure, to which he simply thumbs up. Given the A-OK, Makima begins treating Denji like an actual dog, asking for his paw and to roll over. Denji closes his eyes, and as he's being pet by Makima, he thinks to himself,
I understand it now. I understand it now.
The doorbell suddenly rings, and Makima remarks that Power is here. Denji asks why Makima called over Power, to which Makima asserts her dominance and reminds Denji that dogs aren't supposed to think. Together, they walk towards the door to greet Power, and once there, Makima asks Denji to open the door, and then very casually slips in that she'll kill Power right after. This absolutely blindsides Denji, and he's completely taken aback and struggles to grasp what Makima meant. In a sick moment of deja vu, Kuchida once again warns Denji from opening the door. Except this time, Makima's commands are too loud. Denji stares hard at the door, eventually reaching for the handle. Disregarding Makima, he begins rapidly thinking to himself about how Power might appear outside. She'll pop a firecracker. She'll probably also be holding a cake. Because that's right. Tomorrow is Denji's birthday. He opens the door and is awkwardly greeted by Power, who is holding a birthday cake. Power barely mutters his name before Makima goes bang. Denji gazes at what's remaining of Power's corpse with eyes wide open. He glances at Makima and she notes that his hands are cold again, so they should go back inside. Denji, in absolute shock, stares at Makima, unable to say anything, and she just smiles, quietly staring right back at him. On my initial reading of these chapters, I wasn't prepared whatsoever for both of my two favorite characters in the series to die back to back. I mean, Aki's death was incredibly unfortunate. He had finally found something to live for outside of revenge, only for it to be immediately uprooted in the worst way possible. And then, with barely any pause, Makima outright removes Power in one single manga panel. I don't know about you, but it feels illegal somehow to kill off main characters so easily. I mean, who knows what Fujimoto was smoking back when he was working on part 1, but he smoked the whole pack and didn't look back once. The absolute insanity of these events were crazy to read, and honestly, I can only imagine the impact they would have when animated. And so to give a final thought, I've found that it's rare to find stories that are unafraid to kill off important characters, and it's even rarer to find those stories that do so in a way that takes your breath away. While Aki and Power's deaths left me feeling deeply unsatisfied, I can't deny that they were executed masterfully.